Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Understanding Users podcast, brought to you by Researchable UX. It's great to have you with me. I'm your host, Mike Green. I'm a freelance user research lead and digital consultant based in the UK. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be chatting to various digital experts who I've had the pleasure of working with in recent years. They're from various disciplines, including user research, UX design, development, and product management. And they'll even be a digital business owner or two. I'll be talking to them about how they came to be in their current roles, what they've learned along the way, and what advice they may have for others getting into the field. These are intended to be relaxed, informal chats with professionals who are keen to share their experiences. So sit back and enjoy. Welcome to the second episode of the Understanding Users podcast. My guest this time is Tom Devlin, founder and principal consultant at UserLab, a rapid UX research and user testing company in Newcastle here in the UK. He and I talk about his career, the challenges and benefits of founding and growing your own UX agency, and why researchers should never be afraid of awkward silences. He also plays my 3-card challenge to share his favourite UX tool, favoured technique, and a trend he sees in the future. I hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks so much for joining me, Tom. It's great to have you on the show.
Really happy to be here. Cheers for inviting me, Mike, on the new podcast.
Great. So I introduced you as kind of founder and principal consultant. Tell me a little bit about kind of your role and your organization.
So, UserLab was set up about 4.5 years ago. It was originally just my idea for a usability lab, which I always wanted to do. And since then, we kind of pivoted about 2 years ago. Luckily, we did, because it was very quiet during the pandemic. And then we kind of changed to do more like services, so consultancy as opposed to just lab. It was just originally made as a sole consultant, and slowly grew a team as kind of more work came in. Yeah.
Right. So how many of you are there now?
We're a team of 4 now. So there's me. We've got 2 researchers and a junior researcher who just joined us a few months back.
Right. Who are your clients then? Kind of who are your?
So we do a bit of public sector. It's quite a good mix. We do a lot of public sector stuff, some stuff for NHS. We kind of fall into a kind of niche with kind of health tech stuff as well.
Right.
But also we do a few kind of private sector clients as well, just to keep it kind of a bit fresh and a bit different,
Right. Okay. That's interesting. I'd like to come back to kind of that a little bit more a bit later. But I guess first of all, just sort of talking about you, Tom. So how did you get into digital? And because what fascinates me about the UX world is kind of the varied paths in, and everyone seems to have come a different route. So kind of what was your route into?
Yeah, I think there's no like route that's the same as everyone you meet. It has had a completely different background and different skills and stuff. But I guess mine was I was focused on being a musician when I was very young.
Ah, really?
My kind of late teens, early 20s. So I wasn't really bothered about a career, and I kind of landed in various kind of IT roles.
Right.
And then eventually kind of landed a job in a council where I kind of jumped into a content assistant role.
Right.
And I worked with a lass who worked at the BBC. And she brought a lot to that team. She taught us about kind of usability, accessibility. We were doing like usability testing.
Right.
She introduced me to Jacob Nielsen, and I guess after using after spending so many years in IT and using all these horrible systems,
Right.
when I learned about the kind of principle of usability, and it's not me, it's the system that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's when the kind of the door started opening in my mind, and it was just it was amazing. I just couldn't get enough of it, and that was a bit of a usability kick, I think.
Wow.
But yeah, I think working at the council, I think you really have to do things the right way. So I think usability is obviously important, but accessibility, you have to meet certain standards. So that those two things to me kind of sit quite closely together.
Wow. So from wannabe rock star to UX guru, essentially. It's been
yeah, pretty much.
Interesting. Okay, great. So tell us a little bit about a kind of typical day for you as a lead UX, or lead user researcher, if you like. Kind of what kind of stuff do you work on? What kind of research do you do? How do you structure your day?
Yeah, so it depends what project's going on, really. I mean, it depends what we're doing, but we might be doing a kind of a shorter study, which is just a usability study. We'll always have a catch-up call at the start of the day, like a stand-up call. And sometimes that will be with the client, depending on what project we're doing. If it's a discovery project, we'll tend to include the client in that. If it's just if it's a smaller study, it'll just be us, and then we'll have a different catch-up call with the client. But yeah, it's all about just we've got kind of systems in place now. I'm a bit of a kind of system fiend, so we've got kind of systems where usability study takes 2.5 weeks. Discovery studies take 2-3 months depending on what we're doing. But yeah, we're in a kind of a state of flow where everyone knows what everyone's doing. There's good communication. That took a while to kind of come, but yeah, I think we're at the stage now where we just do things agile, really.
Right. And what effect has COVID and kind of the need to work remotely kind of had on the kind of research you do and how you work?
Yeah, I mean, we positioned ourselves as remote first.
Right.
So basically during the pandemic, as you know, it was just, went a bit crazy, went really quiet for the first couple of months, and then everyone realized that you could do stuff remotely. And we just started just doing everything remotely since then, and I think, there's going to be times when we will do stuff in person, when there's more kind of contextual stuff needed. But
Right.
for the most part, remote stuff is, remote is doing us, it's working well for us at the moment.
Right. So user-centered design is obviously kind of a central term in the work we do. Kind of what does it mean to you, and how does it kind of impact on the work that you and your kind of colleagues do day to day?
Well, I guess, I mean, it's everything really. It's why I set the company up. It's all about just, kind of understanding, who your users are before you start designing for them. Really, if you don't know who they are, you risk making something that no one's going to potentially use, or it's going to be a bad product that's not going to be very usable, and it's not going to meet people's needs. So yeah, that's kind of at the core of what we do. We did a workshop where we developed a set of values for the company a few months back. I think one of the first one is meet user needs one project at a time. So it's all about understanding not only about kind of evidencing the needs of the people that you're doing research with, but also understanding client needs, understanding your colleagues' needs, all that kind of stuff.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned clients' needs. I was going to ask you kind of how do you you talked about kind of having some daily stand-ups in certain cases with clients, but as you're going through and kind of gathering research insights, how do you share that knowledge that you've gained and those insights with your clients and kind of with your team?
Yeah, it's interesting you ask this because I've been thinking about this lately. We're still very much in the kind of the report stage, but we'll share reports, we'll share videos as part of that report and presentation.
Right.
But I think I want to try and be a bit more innovative and just do things a bit differently. Use more kind of well edited video clips and memes and stuff like that. I think just make it a bit more engaging because people don't engage that well with reports.
Right.
Presentations maybe yes, if you can kind of mix it up a bit, but mainly reports at the moment.
So when you say reports, what is that, like a PDF document or
It's a
something?
PDF document. Yeah, it's a PDF document that we do a kind of hybrid thing, which is a presentable PDF. So it's not really wordy.
Right.
There's not too much on the slide, but it's it's got the essential stuff on there. So that's what we do mainly.
Ah. So how then do you think kind of can user researchers, we and I include obviously we're both user researchers, ensure that they have an impact on the product teams that they're working with and kind of the services that they're helping to research into, primarily
Yeah,
to ensure they meet those user needs that you talked about?
in terms of the understanding the research,
Well,
communicating the research.
yeah, I suppose it's an ultimately beyond that kind of making an impact, ensuring that what they're learning is actually then being used to build services which meet the needs of users.
Yeah, I guess it's about communicating it really well. I think there's a good quote that I like from John Waterworth, who used to be the head of research at GDS. User research is two parts communication, one part research. There's no point doing all this amazing research if no one's going to hear about it, if you're not going to present it well, if you're not going to present it in a kind of meaningful way.
Right.
So yeah, I guess the communication thing is really important. So that's letting people know what you're doing, get them involved in the research, helping them kind of boot the research, helping them design the tasks, get them involved in every kind of stage, getting them to observe, take notes, obviously, and even help with the analysis and reporting if you can. So it's just getting them engaged in that, because you'll find that often the kind of most disengaged, once they kind of see research in action or understand what you're doing, you'll see that kind of penny drop moment, and they will be really engaged. It's just about kind of doing that from the start. I learned that the hard way. I think when I was doing stuff in government, and I think it was HMRC, you've got a lot of kind of powerful stakeholders in the mix. And when I first started doing the research, I saw it very much as kind of us and them.
Right.
and they would be doing their kind of comms and reports. They'll have the whole kind of insights teams doing that. We'd have our kind of user research little outfit, and yeah, I think that the sooner that you can kind of get to know these people and just work with them as opposed to against them, I think that's when the kind of beauty starts happening.
Yeah, it's interesting. That really resonates with me. This
Yeah,
particularly because most of my work in the recent years has been in government. Is that need to kind of bring civil servants, policymakers with you, and as you say, involve them in observation, involve them in the analysis, and then kind of you can almost see the light bulb moment when they're like, okay, now I understand why the user doesn't understand the guidance that we wrote for them, etc., etc. So
yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. And you mentioned there kind of obviously government, and but I'm interested that what should, because you've also done obviously UserLab done a bunch of private sector work, private sector clients. What's been the biggest kind of difference for you as an organization in dealing with, or you personally dealing with public sector versus private sector in terms of
um,
culture, communication, anything else?
yeah. So I guess it depends. There's a few. Yeah. I guess public sector they have more motivation to do things the right way. You know, you've got to, if you want to be on Gov.uk, or if you want to be on if you want to be an NHS website, for example,
Right,
you've got to meet certain standards. So I think most of the time people are kind of bought into that, and they want to do it the right way.
right,
There are still some kind of learnings there with like some of the smaller agencies. There's quite a lot of different kind of sub agencies and stuff. We did a project with part of the NHS a couple of months ago, and they didn't really know about any of this, so we had to kind of introduce that, and we had to kind of introduce the principles, the NHS design principles, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, often it kind of depends on the team and the maturity of the team, I guess.
right,
Sometimes they'll be bought in, sometimes they'll need a bit of kind of learning. There's always an education piece, I think, with user research. Whatever you're doing, you've always got to be educating them.
right,
It's just part of the role, really.
right,
I guess with some of the private sector stuff, yeah, there's almost like a sense of right. They know exactly what they want. They want often they want validation. You know,
right.
they want or they
We
want
know
yeah
our
they want
users type thing.
yeah or they want to change the website, and they basically want some evidence from someone else to kind of back them up really so they can kind of get budget approval, or
Right, right,
that kind of
right.
stuff.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, no, a lot that resonates a lot, and you get that kind of the hippo, the highest paid person in the room, and I've seen that certainly when I was in the
Yeah,
private sector, where teams will do research and design, and they'll have a design which is well tested and well proven, and then someone will swoop in from above, and I think seagull management is also known as, isn't it, for obvious
Seagull.
reasons.
I've never heard that before. Seagull management. Brilliant.
For obvious reasons, to kind of like, yes, to despoil what the work that's been done and kind of change
Yeah.
direction that whim. But no, very interesting. So we talked a little bit about kind of UserLab at the beginning, and I'm really keen to hear more about that. And so just sort of tell me a little bit more about kind of how you started it and why you started it. You said it's about 4 years old, is that right?
Yeah, so I was working in it's 4.5 years old. It's the same age as my daughter. Yeah,
Right.
never start a business and family at the same time for anyone listening. Um, Pretty stressful. I guess the motivation for starting it, I was working in a government digital team. I was doing pretty well. I was enjoying it, and then I think I was made a manager, and I was kind of doing all the things associated with management, and I wasn't doing much of the hands-on research anymore, which I missed.
Right.
Um, and I think I always had I had this kind of dream of setting up a usability lab for
Right.
years and years, and I noticed that there was a demand for this kind of thing, and there wasn't any in the Northeast. So
Right.
I thought I would just put my kind of passions of user research and technology together and just make this thing, because all the ones that we'd seen so far were like massive budgets, like 100K and stuff. And I
Right.
think we built one for like 20K. Well, I didn't build it, but someone else built it in the team. And the technology and stuff was just awful. And I thought, well, I can do that for much cheaper, using different bits of tech. So I think I built it for about 5K originally, which was
Right.
just really cheap in it. But
Right.
it was good quality, using like open source software and stuff.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I think I it's pretty bad as a researcher, but I think I built it on assumption. I didn't do any research into the market.
Right.
I wasn't a businessman. I just kind of took a plunge, and it kind of worked out. I probably made a lot of mistakes, lost a lot of money in the early years, but yeah, I think you learn from those moments, don't you? And you kind of grow. Um,
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned the Northeast, so I'm interested to know the kind of geographical aspect because you've sort of carved a bit of a niche for yourself up there, haven't you? I guess there's kind of less competition than there would be, for example, in London or Bristol or the kind of more obvious UX centers.
yeah, so there was one or two agencies which were like full service UX design agencies. So they would, they would do, or they would say they would do the research, but not everyone actually did the research. They would do design, they would do development, all that kind of thing. So I think, yeah, there was like two other agencies and us, but now I think we're the only one.
Right.
So yeah, at the moment there are maybe some other agencies who do more like design and development, but don't focus on a research aspect. So yeah, we're more in a niche, I guess. But I've been thinking lately, maybe should we do more design? I don't know. We do a little bit here and there.
Right, right. And how do you typically kind of find work and find new clients as an agency? Do you go out and pitch, or do they come to you, or is it recommendation, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's mainly we get a mix of kind of organic stuff through Google,
Right,
which is always interesting. So we sometimes get invited to pitch for stuff that way, and yeah, I would say about half of it is through Google, half of it is through some of the kind of the tendering frameworks, public sector stuff,
right,
which is really competitive at the moment. But yeah, that's generally how we do it. I'm the worst person at sales and networking, but yeah, as part of me moving away from doing the hands-on research and kind of more of the kind of leading the company role. I'm kind of learning more of this stuff and doing a bit more of that day to day. Yeah,
right. It's that kind of founder thing where you have to spread your wings and kind of become a jack of all
yeah,
trades.
you have.
So, what's been easier than expected about kind of founding an agency and kind of growing it? And
uh,
conversely, what's been harder than you expected?
I think the easy thing for me is the kind of the I guess the branding, the content, the marketing, finding time to do that. That's a struggle when you obviously you run a team and a family. It's quite a small team. Um, those things have been easy. I mean, obviously, running, leading on research projects because I've done it for a few years. I can kind of do that quite confidently without any prep and stuff, and kind of leading client meetings.
Yeah,
I think that thing comes with time though. Whereas at the start, I would know my subject, but I might be a bit kind of nervous about how do you work with clients, how do you
right,
communicate with clients, how do you sell something,
right,
all that kind of stuff was completely new to me. So as you go, you just kind of learn little tidbits and little techniques and stuff here and there, and then you see what works, what doesn't, and then you just iterate it. Yeah, just keeping
right.
it really flexible like that.
And what's been your single biggest challenge or your biggest pain point, to use a question I often ask research participants during research interviews?
Phew, I think yeah, one of them is. I mean, there's been a few projects over the years. Let me think. Where I've thought, yeah, we're not going to do like that anymore. I think every project we do, we learn something.
Right,
I guess challenges in terms of yeah, just keeping morale up, keeping the team organized. Also, yeah, just kind of managing the kind of expectations of clients and
right,
and the research. Yeah, it's. I guess there's not been a single most challenge I can probably think of. Well, I can think of one where we did some research or some recruitment for a client where they were wanting to speak to people in China, people in the US,
right.
different time zones, different kind of obviously languages. We had to get translators in. People didn't
Oh
show up. We still had
wow,
to pay the
right,
translators, that kind of thing. That was just a nightmare.
right,
But also, yeah, a project we did a few months ago. It was a discovery project where when we read the brief, there was things in there which we wouldn't normally do in terms of outputs.
right,
Um, but we thought, we'll put a proposal together and see what we would do, and we would say we'd work with you to do these outputs.
right,
Um, but yeah, it turned out okay. But if I went back in time, I would probably do things a bit differently and just stick to our kind of guns and say, right, we don't do that. This is what we do. This is what we do best, as
right,
opposed to trying to kind of tailor the outputs to the client needs. So yeah, there's always stuff like that you can learn from each project.
right, right. Absolutely. So, what are the key characteristics, would you say, or personality traits that make someone a good user researcher?
Ooh, I guess yeah, they have to be really, those kind of interpersonal skills, having kind of empathy, curiosity is the obvious one as well.
Yeah.
But just being a good listener, you'd be
Right.
surprised how many people don't actually do that. When I used to have the lab, I used to sit in on sessions, and when it was just me running the place, I used to observe a lot of user researchers, and you'd be surprised how few researchers will just let that kind of silence go.
Right.
Those awkward silences, and just trying to kind of fill them. Trying to fill them with like talking too much, and prompting too much, and it doesn't make for a natural kind of feeling, or it's not gonna make things happen naturally. You're forcing people in a way,
Yeah.
and there's almost like there's definitely a sense of trying to kind of validate things in some ways, which I've seen with some of the younger, more, well, not always younger, just kind of less experienced researchers. I don't know if you've found that yourself, but there's a lot of
Yeah, it's very interesting, that kind of silence that you talk about, the need for the kind of power that brings and the insight that brings, often by not jumping in, just letting people talk and letting people struggle to a certain extent without sort of putting them
yeah,
unduly under pressure. But particularly if you're sort of showing a prototype or something,
yeah.
not, as you say, not jumping in and helping them, because that completely defeats the point of it.
Yeah, I think if you just introduce the session well, and they know exactly what they're doing, then if you've got any questions, you can just ask me, and just sit back and just shut up and let them do it. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there's a good. I don't know if you read Nick Bomast's book Userpalooza, but there's a good diagram in there which I think he's got like a pie chart or something, or an infographic. And it's like,
Right,
write down how much time you spend talking, record how much time you spent talking, and record how much the participant did,
right.
and then create this infographic, and you might be surprised. I've
That's
done it myself.
interesting.
Sometimes I do it when you're a bit nervous and you just kind of talk endlessly,
Yeah.
and then you watch a session back, you think, God, I wish I would just shut up, and let them do the thing.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's very true, isn't it? So what tips or advice, kind of based on sort of things we were just talking about, would you give an aspiring user researcher? So if someone came to you and said, I'd love to get into this world, it seems fascinating, how can I do that? What would you say to them?
Yeah, so there's a lot of people really interested at the minute, and rightly so. It's an interesting area. I think I think it's really important to know the fundamentals, the theory side. So I think you learn by doing. You're only going to learn in view and analysis techniques by doing those things. But I think understanding things like cognitive biases is so important. Understanding, having an interest in psychology.
Right.
Um, Understanding design principles. I mean, this might be a lot to ask of someone, but I think understanding design principles is really going to help how you if you before you get to the kind of the research stage, testing products with users, it's really important to understand what comes before that. So that kind of heuristic evaluation, expert review,
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
understanding, right, what's wrong with this design, how would people use it,
Yeah.
is this all those buttons in the right position, etc.,
Yeah.
and the interface. Understanding those things is really important. So getting a bit of an understanding of design principles, HCI, that kind of stuff, or even basic web design you could start with. There's a lot of different courses out there.
Yeah.
So psychology, cognitive biases, design principles, and obviously usability. Usability heuristics is really important, and
Yeah.
accessibility, I would say, as well.
Totally. No, I totally agree with all of that. And what's always struck me about this industry is how kind of open and sharing it is. Like when I
Yeah,
first wanted to move into UX, I did a psychology master's degree, which is kind of what pivoted me into this world. And I remember reaching out to some quite well-known people in this industry, and they didn't know me from Adam, and I was nobody to them. But I said, can we have a chat? And invariably they said yes, and they'd either give me a phone call or sometimes, in a couple of cases, met up for a drink. And they shared all their kind of knowledge and expertise and tips, and read this book and go and talk to that person. And I thought that was remarkable, because there's many
yeah,
industries where you wouldn't get that sort of
definitely, yeah.
welcome, which was lovely.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the kind of knowledge business, right? So I think
Yeah,
that's that kind of information sharing, knowledge sharing, and there's a good sense of community. There's a good, I don't know if you're on Slack, Research Ops. That's a really good community, very
I'm
supportive.
on Slack, but not that one.
And
Interesting.
I think in my kind of government days, this yourself, the community there was really good. I think that
Yes.
really helped me. I think learn from. There's some really good researchers.
Yep.
I was working with back then. I think having kind of people to be mentored, you can kind of learn from, be mentored by, is really, really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true, isn't it? The mentoring thing, and I've mentored a few kind of juniors over the last few years, and what I find is it's that age-old thing about teachers learn as they're teaching. It's kind of, if you're mentoring people, it helps
Yeah,
you improve your own skills because
definitely.
you have to explain things clearly, you have to demonstrate well, you have to kind of support them, and it's a sort of win-win, isn't it? It's lovely.
Yeah, and likewise, you can do that for them, can't you? If you're mentoring someone and you want them to learn something, you could just get them, do a project, do a presentation on this, do a
Yeah,
blog post on this, whatever, and that's going to help them learn really quickly.
yeah, absolutely. Um, what do you love about what you do? What's your kind of big thing that gets you up in the morning?
Um,
I'm putting you on the spot here.
yeah, what do I love? I mean, I'm really passionate about kind of usability, obviously inclusive design, and
Right.
yeah, it's just really good when you can help people, and
Yeah.
I think trying to help teams understand, how people use their systems, how they can make them better, but also making things better for the people who are going to be using them. Um, some projects are more rewarding than others. If you're doing a public sector project, it's obviously going to kind of be more wide reaching because it's going to affect a lot of people. We're doing a project at the moment with the council where it's like an online kind of behavioural change system.
Right.
That kind of thing, and the kind of feedback so far has been really good. So those kind of projects, when you think about who the end user is and just making them more likely to succeed in their goal by making this system more usable, accessible, etc. That's the stuff that keeps me going, I think.
Yeah, that's lovely, isn't it? And it's almost like if we're doing our jobs, we're invisible because people are using these things, and then they're not getting frustrated or sort of tearing their hair out at the processes online that don't make any sense. And
Yeah,
we've
yeah,
done our job. It's kind of
exactly.
like, yeah, interesting. Um, okay, last couple of things. I thought I'd mix things up a little bit. So, are you ready for a 3-card challenge?
Go
So
for it. Yeah.
I've done this with previous guests. So I'm going to ask you. This is about 3 top tips. So there's tools, techniques, and trends. Okay. So your top tip for a tool is a tool that you use all the time in the work you do, and you've mentioned a bunch of them already. But if there's one particular one that you kind of like or find useful, and kind of why you do. Techniques is a particular UX technique that you use regularly and you find useful, kind of either yourself or with your team members. And finally, a trend that you kind of see growing or developing in user experience, user research over the coming years. How does that sound?
Yeah. Let's have a
So,
go at that.
so I've got 3 cards here, and I've got a diamond, a heart, and a club, and I'm going to hold them up because we're looking at each other over video. And on the back of each, I've written trend, tool, or technique. So choose a card.
Let's go for the middle one, the blue heart.
The
Yeah,
blue
it's that
is
tool.
tool.
So if you'd asked me this a few years back, I would have said OBS because that was just kind of revolutionary for setting the lab up. We had this amazing bit of kit. It's basically, if anyone's not familiar with it, it's a streaming tool that was made by gamers. So when you see these gamers on YouTube
Right.
and they're recording themselves playing games, basically it's designed for that. But we kind of repurposed it and started using it for research sessions. So we would do recording. You can do picture in picture.
Right.
You can hook up, different devices and stuff like that if you're doing testing on a phone, for example. So yeah, it does the recording side, but it also does the streaming side. So you not only kind of record the session on your laptop, you can also stream it on a private server or whatever, YouTube, whatever you want to use.
Right.
So I would have said that a few years ago, but with us shifting to remote stuff, we're not doing as much with OBS. We're doing everything, in Zoom, etc.
Right.
A tool that we use every day for pretty much everything that's really handy and intuitive is got to be Miro, I would say.
Right.
It's just great for not only you can do analysis, you can do kick-off workshops, you can do discovery workshops, you can do blueprints, all that kind of
Right.
stuff. It's just really good because you can just kind of map things easily, move things around, you can comment on things,
Yeah.
and it's just great for collaboration really with
And for those
clients.
that aren't familiar, Miro is a large kind of online interactive infinite whiteboard essentially that you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a whiteboard. So we tried a few of the different whiteboards when we were first kind of experimenting, and Miro was and still is for us anyway, is the most intuitive.
Right.
It's just, it's kind of simple, but not too simple. It's got
Right.
it's got the kind of just exactly the functionality you need, and it's really easy to kind of move around and comment on things and stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
no,
perfect.
interesting. I use it all the time myself, and I totally agree. I think it's been a game changer. And in kind of even writing on post-it notes and sticking them up on boards seems incredibly pre-COVID now. You know, you just get so used to doing it all virtually. It's great. Okay, so we've got 2 more cards. Pick another.
Let's go for the pink triangle one. Yeah.
Right. So that is
Trend.
tell,
Okay.
tell me about a trend.
So what do I think is going to happen in the next few years, or in terms
Yeah,
of
I mean,
UX user research?
there's endless articles online about trends, but I'm just interested. Is there
Yeah.
anything that kind of either interests you, or you'd like to do more of, or you see kind of growing and clients demanding more of potentially?
Yeah, I think there's going to be there's definitely more going on in the AI space and like everywhere basically, and I think AI is getting better
Right.
every day, and I think some of the kind of the voice assistant stuff is getting really good. I think there's going to be it's going to come where there's going to be that kind of unmoderated research maybe with an AI researcher. I don't know how effective that's going to be because you're going to have to there's going to be certain kind of nuances and mannerisms that you're going to have to be aware of. It can maybe only go so far, especially for remote stuff, which is probably where it's going to go first. But yeah, that the AI thing is probably definitely going to happen. Probably definitely, yeah, probably.
So, do you think, interestingly, do you think that like lorry drivers are at risk in the future with kind of autonomous trucks? Does that put people like you and me kind of at risk?
No, I think it'll just be another tool in our arsenal that we may want to use. So I think
Right.
instead of, I think it's just going to, I think, unmoderated testing tools, I'm not so much a fan of them anyway. They do have their uses. I think one of the problems that we've had with them is that you've got a whole kind of user base out there who see this as their job. They're very savvy. A lot of them are kind of web design professionals, and they basically sign up for all the sites and then give feedback. I think if you do your own recruitment as part of that tool, it works all right. But yeah, we're kind of sidetracking a bit here. So I guess in terms of AI replacing researchers, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's just going to be a tool that we might want to utilize that might we would still design the thing and hopefully use it not just on its own, but as part of alongside another study to triangulate that data.
Right. It's interesting you say about professional participants, because that's something in terms of going back to sort of lab tests and that kind of stuff. You have people who you can tell early on have done this a lot and kind of know what they're supposed to say and know where they're supposed to go and know how they're supposed to react, and it's very frustrating as a researcher.
It's rife. Honestly,
Yeah.
I had to kind of bite my tongue a few times because we had confidential agreements with obviously different clients, and well, I know myself as a researcher when we did some sessions, I seen the same guy who I thought I'd seen like last year, and I brought this up. And I said, were you involved in this last year? He was like, no. And it was the recruiter in question had basically, I've learned that some recruiters do things very old-fashioned, and in a very old-fashioned way. They have like kind of, contacts on their phones who they just email out.
Right.
Some of the old school ones. And obviously that list is quite kind of small. And eventually you see the same participants appear. But yeah, it happens more than you would think, really, unfortunately. Especially with some of the kind of the old school recruiters. I don't know how much it happens with like panels and stuff like that. You would hope it's not as much because there's less kind of human input there. But yeah,
useful caveat. Brilliant. Okay, and then the last one we have the club, which is
technique. So what was the question? What's kind of a go-to technique?
Well, yeah, just a technique that you use or your kind of colleagues use kind of regularly that you like, that works, that is a go-to technique, let's say.
I guess in terms of a method, so you can't beat field testing. I think, like I mentioned before, when I first set things up, I was thinking, right, you need to do it in the lab, but that's not real world at all. People don't use things in labs, and it's good for benchmarking. But if you want to get a feel for how people actually use your thing, then do it in the field, do it in person in their house. But the great thing about doing stuff remotely is you can do that quite easily these days. You can get a feel for different people's different systems, their environment, how they use it in their home, etc. So yeah, I guess that's something that we do that we do a lot of, kind of that contextual stuff, but remote contextual stuff, remote iconography you might want to call it.
Right.
What's a good technique apart from that? I don't know. What would you say? What was your answer be?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because a good UXer has got a whole sort of grab bag of different tools and techniques that we can draw on, and yeah, it very much depends on the project in question. I mean, one thing that I've done a couple of times recently is diary studies, which I really like, and it takes a lot more work to set them up, but it's kind of, if you want to do analysis, research over a period of time, kind of looking at behavior rather than sort of a 1 hour snapshot in a lab. Here's a prototype, look at this. You kind of say, how do you live your life doing particular, service, or, trying to carry out task X. And rather than being there in person, people can just sort of self-record what they're doing and what they're thinking. And I find it quite powerful. It takes a lot more work and a lot more analysis, but potentially you get some really good insights.
Yeah, we chatted about this a few months back when you were telling me about how you did yours, and we did something similar. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's really good in terms of. I think we should be doing more research like that, like asynchronously, because I think a lot of the time as researchers we put our kind of fixed deadlines, our 9 to 5 times on the participants. Often they kind of make it; they've got other stuff going on, but people are more flexible these days, and I think diary studies, perfect. It's a good way of collecting that data in people's own time, more naturally. I think the only thing that worries me about diary studies, and you've obviously done this a lot more, I think it's about kind of keeping people engaged. Like, at what point is that to do with recruitment, like recruiting the right people who are really interested, or does there come a point where people naturally kind of fall off, or less engaged? But you've got to just kind of keep that engagement up, and do kind of check-ins and stuff like that, I guess. But yeah.
It's a really good point, and there's a sort of fine line between having a typical study, long enough to kind of derive good insights, but without being too long. I find that a week or two, kind of, obviously depends what it is, but the kinds of things I've done beyond a couple of weeks, even beyond a week, really, if you're asking people to record something every day, unless you're waving a lot of money at them, which is arguably not the right motivation to do it either. It becomes quite challenging.
And like making those incentives, like spreading them out, so you say right after a week you get one, and then after the following week you get that. How did you record your data? I think we used a spreadsheet, and we did a telephone call check-in as well.
So we did a sort of mix. Interesting. So we did a mixed methods one. So we had check-in calls at the beginning to get them set up, at the end to kind of just run through their experiences in a sort of more qualitative way. But then I sent out a Google form. So I sent them. We used Gov Notify, so the SMS system. So they received a text message every day. So it didn't come from my phone; it came from Gov, the UK government, and there was just a short SMS and a link to a Google form, and then they just clicked on that and then just filled in a very, very simple Google form. So there was a bit of, and we had sort of slightly longer form, text answers, but also Likert scales. So there was a bit of mix of quant and qual, and that was then populated in a spreadsheet. So it come almost in real time. We could see the results coming in. But obviously, exactly as you said, not everyone was engaged all the time. Some of them just disappeared and we never heard from them again. Some people were religious in every day submitting responses. Some people were very flaky, but you just have to roll with that. And
there's just so many tools out there, isn't it? You could use, you use WhatsApp.
Exactly.
You wouldn't always get signed up for that because of the data thing. But
exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting. Brilliant. Okay. Well, that's pretty much the end. So thank you so much, Tom. That's been really, really interesting. I really enjoyed our chat, and good to catch up again. It's been a while. Any other final comments or thoughts before I let you go, and anything we've touched on?
No, just thanks for having me again, and best of luck with the podcast, and always a pleasure to catch up. Cheers, Mike.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks very much for listening to the second episode of the Understanding Users podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, do please like or comment on this episode on either Apple Podcasts or Podbean, and feel free to share it more widely so others have a chance to listen as well. Next time I'll be talking to Dr. John Sykes, an award-winning freelance design consultant who's worked on major service design and transformation projects across the public and private sectors for many years. Until then, stay safe and stay user-centered.